Welcome back to the First and Goal podcast, everyone. And here we are with Mitch Weinberg on a Tuesday. We have a lot to talk about today. Going to talk about a lot of cap situations, a lot of free agency talk. But first, we kick it off with quarterback discussions. And last week, we covered in our last week podcast on Friday the Carson Wentz trade, and we also discussed how we think this is maybe not only the beginning because we've already seen Matthew Stafford, the Matthew Stafford trade, but we definitely think there's more to come. So me and him are going to break down. We have five quarterbacks here. Yep, five quarterbacks that could be potentially traded, and our thoughts on whether they will be, and if we do think they will be, we will give a place and a destination that they will spend their 2020 season with. So let's kick it off with the biggest name, or maybe the second biggest name, one of the one of the two biggest names on this list to kick it off, Russell Wilson. Now I have him going no. I have a no for a trade. But Mitch, you have a yes. Why do you think he will be traded?
Ultimately, I think that Seattle has a little bit of interest in trading him because they would not have just ultimately announced what their price was. And we see that Russell Wilson is not super happy with his situation, especially looking at his offensive line. And I'm sure you don't blame him for it. So the price that Russell Wilson is three first round picks, apparently. And I think for Russell Wilson, that's a pretty fair price. A player that's a Pro Bowler, All Pro, and ultimately, sure, he's 32 years old and on a big contract, but you could make some shifts around him. And this is a guy that can play wherever. And he's just not happy in Seattle. A lot of the quarterbacks are not happy in their current situation. And look at the NFL around us. It's the perfect market for Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson needs to go to a team with a better offensive line with Seattle. But then again, that's a really low bar. And it has nothing to do with Seattle's weapons. It has to do with the coaching and like what the team's future is actually looking like. And Russell Wilson, I don't think is just having it. I don't think he's having it. Will Seattle eventually end up trading him? I think maybe, but it's not like he's getting traded 100%. This is absolutely going to happen. But just a thought that this is a pretty decent possibility, in my opinion.
I think that it is absolutely ridiculous that anyone would give this thought the time of day that Russell Wilson could possibly be traded. I just don't see it because, sure, the price got leaked, okay? And we don't know how. Maybe it was someone in the front office of the Seahawks. Maybe it wasn't someone who was as close to the decision making process. But, Mitch, are you really going to tell me that after even though they didn't win the Super Bowl last year, they still made the playoffs. This is a good football team that is a couple pieces away from really contending. You're going to tell me that they might throw away their franchise quarterback for the last 10 years and the guy that is, when surrounded by talented players, he's a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. You're going to tell me that they might get rid of that guy?
I think they ultimately could because looking at the team around them, sure, you mentioned that they're a few pieces away. That's the way it seems anyway. I mean, they're in a very contending division. And I think that there's just a disconnect between Russell Wilson and the front office. If it's not this year, it could be next year. And within the next few years, I'm not saying Russell Wilson's going to decline. This is no knock on Russell Wilson. And a lot of people have called me crazy for telling them that Russell Wilson's going to end up
Wouldn't be the
traded.
first time. Wouldn't be the first time.
What I was thinking that wouldn't be the first time, but this is arguably one of my boldest takes, and I've had some doozies. Um, but the defense, it's good. Okay, when Russell Wilson won the Super Bowl and they went back in 2014, they had a really good defense, Legion of Boom in its prime, at its best. There's arguably no better defense than that. Maybe the '85 Bears. Actually, no, only the '85 Bears. Actually, and I think that Seattle may seem like a contending team, but I'm not buying into Seattle. Going into this year, I had high hopes for them, as did everybody else. And I'm not blaming Jamal Adams for this, but Seattle is right now future. They don't have first round picks this year or next year, if I'm correct. And they're going to need some things. And I'm sure that a team would trade a ton to get him. And I think could Seattle end up with a package of draft picks, like a huge package, like a Matthew Stafford deal, if not even bigger? Yes. Could Seattle potentially win a trade by trading Wilson? Sure. Yes. Do I think that it's tipping over the edge where it will happen? No, but I'm saying it's a possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen, as I mentioned, but I would not rule it 100% out of the equation.
Okay, I have a couple things to say to that. First of all, of course, someone will want him and someone will want to put together a big package for him. Listen, someone will want Aaron Rodgers out there. Someone will want Patrick Mahomes out there. That doesn't mean they're going to get traded ultimately. And second of all, why do you think it's in the best interest of the Seattle Seahawks to trade Russell Wilson? Because at the end of the day, if he is traded, which I really don't think he will be, it'll be the Seattle Seahawks decision. It won't be Russell Wilson's decision. So why do you think it'll be in the Seahawks' best interest? Because I mean, getting 3 first-round picks back or even four, like I don't feel like that's what the Seahawks want right now. The rest of their team is in a win now mode. They might not be so Super Bowl ready, but they are in a win now mode. Just to load up on picks, I just don't see it.
Two things. First of all, you mentioned how people want Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. Sure, every team can whip up a bundle for them and they'll decline it. But I think not yet. The Packers, as of right now, has deemed Aaron Rodgers untouchable, and I'd say he's untouchable. I think the Packers would be ridiculous and stupid to trade him. And Patrick Mahomes, well, if they signed him to 10 years, I think he's untouchable. But then again, you can make the same argument for Russell Wilson that he signed a big contract and that he's untouchable. But they've laid out a price. A third of the teams are willing to reach out and field their calls. A third. They're not like the Texans shutting down every call they get for Deshaun Watson, but we'll get into him in a few seconds. But I could see how this could be beneficial to Seattle. It may not just be picks, it could be players. I mean, we haven't seen like a good player for player deal in forever. I can't remember the last good one, honestly. You don't tell me the Matthew Stafford one was, because we both know
That wasn't
no,
mainly a player for player
no.
trade.
But there were two players in it. Exactly. There was no like actual main player
Jared
for
Goff,
player
yeah,
trade.
Jared Goff was not the main asset in that trade.
Oh, absolutely not.
The Lions did not call up the Rams and be like, "Can we get Matthew Stafford for Jared Goff?" Like, no.
The Lions called up the Rams and asked for Aaron Donald. I mean, shoot for the stars, man.
Big
Go
drop
crazy.
off. Big drop off. um,
I mean,
um,
Aaron
yes.
Donald, who knows? You can try what you want, but if Seattle finds a deal that they like, because I am bashing a little bit on Seattle's front office. It's a little tipsy, in my opinion. I'm not saying they're drunk, but like they're like, okay, certain decisions, okay, fine, makes sense. But if Seattle finds a deal that they somewhat like, and there are many hypothetical situations where Seattle could win this trade, it may set them back by 2 or 3 years, but what will actually end up propelling them forward within the next few years? Look, the quarterback market next year, not the greatest, if I'm being honest with you. Draft class wise, Spencer Rattler, again, I think he's a fine quarterback. We haven't seen enough of him yet. So this is in no way, shape, or form a knock against Spencer Rattler. But if we look at the free agent quarterbacks too next year, Sam Darnold, assuming he doesn't get an extension, whatever. I'm ruling out the players that I think will get an extension. The players that have like market value that won't have an extension, Taysom Hill. That is it. Nick Foles or Mariota. A bunch of those quarterbacks we will get into, but again, could Seattle end up whipping up a trade with a team that has a struggling quarterback next year? Yes, absolutely. Because the team will go ham on a quarterback when there's no market for one within the next few years, in my opinion. Because the quarterbacks next year, Baker Mayfield, Lamar, those are the players. I think maybe 50 options. I'm not 100% sure, but those are, according to Sport Tech, the free agent quarterbacks. I think they'll get re signed, and Josh Allen too, but just saying, teams with a struggling quarterback situation next year, maybe like, oh crap, Russell Wilson, is he actually on the table? I'm going to do something stupid and give up my entire future for Russell Wilson. And is Russell Wilson going to be better for much longer? Maybe. He's not Aaron Rodgers, who's going to be good or till like how old's A-Rod now? Almost
he's gonna turn 38 this season.
38. He's not the ageless wonder that most people think he is. I think Russell Wilson's a dangerous player, and I'm not bashing on him. But if a team goes ham on a player that's 32, 33, Seattle could potentially win this trade. And they also get his cap off the table, which I'm not saying he's not worth the contract, but just saying it's a possibility of something that could be beneficial to Seattle.
I will also say, talking about your age point, Um, Definitely a big factor that he has been taking hits like he has throughout the course of his 10-year career to this point. That is the kind of stuff that takes years off of your career, absolutely. And it's also hard to keep up consistently the way that he plays in the style of his play. So that is something to keep your eye on, whether the longevity is there for Russell Wilson. So moving on, we have Sam Darnold, the second quarterback, one of the more enticing guys this offseason. I do think he will be traded, and I think the Jets are really going to fall in love with Zach Wilson at the number 2 spot. Like I think we both have. I think we both are big fans of Zach Wilson. I think the Jets are going to see the same thing in Wilson and realize that, all right, we see this guy. We really like what he has. Let's move on from Darnold, get some capital back for him, reload, and make that second push, move on from Darnold, get into that second era. Now, a place that I think Darnold could get to is the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears have missed out on Matthew. Well, they were. I wouldn't really say they were in the running for Stafford because the Lions are in division, so stuff like that doesn't really happen in division. But um, there haven't been many reports about them being active in Deshaun Watson trade rumors. I've really heard them die out in those reports. They missed out on Carson Wentz, who they were reportedly going very heavy for. So those two guys, I wouldn't say Watson is completely out of the mix, but I just don't see him going to Chicago anymore. I really think Darnold is the last option for the Chicago Bears, unless they're going to want to trade up to pick 3, which is going to be very difficult to do from pick 19. So Darnold, to me, looks like the only option right now at a new quarterback that could potentially be your franchise guy this offseason. So I think the Bears could really make a big push for Sam Darnold.
I think the Bears easily could make a push for Sam Darnold. There's many teams that could. But right now in the Sam Darnold world, over the past, I want to say the whole year, honestly, because the Jets going into the season tanking for another quarterback. But Sam Darnold, I've heard no reports of any teams having interest in him as of late. As of late, I haven't heard so many teams interested in him. And I'm not saying Sam Darnold, the Jets are 100% going to move on from him, because I'm not 100% convinced that Robert Saleh is just going to give up on him right away. Sam Darnold, there's no good trade the Jets could get for Darnold unless getting them off their cap is all they want, which would only save them
Not a
like,
lot. He's on his rookie deal.
yeah, exactly. It wouldn't save him so much. So I don't see a deal where the Jets ultimately win. Do I see a situation where they end up picking an offensive lineman at 3 and saying Sam Darnold's our guy? There's a potential situation right there that I think could be very interesting. I'm not saying it will happen, but if it did happen, it would not shock me at all. Now I mentioned the Bears situation. Um, Devonta Smith came out and said the other day, no, someone asked him, who'd you prefer, Tua or Mac Jones? In a heartbeat, he said Mac Jones. I'm not saying Mac Jones is going to be a first-round quarterback, and I'm not saying the Patriots might not take him, but as we mentioned, Trey Lance could fall. Um, Justin Fields, no, he's probably, it depends where Justin Fields goes. And Mac Jones will more than likely be there. If he's not there, I'd be shocked. I'm not saying the Bears would trade up in the first round, but hypothetically, if they were to trade up in the second round and end up getting Mac Jones, Mac Jones is probably the only other quarterback that would fall that's decent in the second round. It's a possibility, and I'm not 100% convinced that Robert Saleh is going to move on from Sam Darnold just because I have not heard anything. I haven't heard anything, and that's a little concerning.
Listen, Jones is going top 10. Mitch, falling to the second round.
Top 10,
He's
really?
going top 10. Listen, I'm not a big Mac Jones fan. I'm not a big fan of the style of football he plays, but I mean, I don't see any way he falls out of the top 10.
I
The
don't see how he
demand
goes in the top
the
10. I'm so
demand the
confused.
demand for quarterbacks this offseason, we have seen it. The demand for quarterbacks this offseason is ridiculously high. Teams are wanting quarterbacks, and Mac Jones is a consistent quarterback. We know what he is. He put up good numbers, which is, I know that's not what we really look for, but he did it at Alabama. He was very, very good. You have the high praise from Devonta Smith. I think all signs are pointing towards Mac Jones going top 10 right now. I just don't see how it doesn't happen because I think there are going to be a lot of teams that trade up to that top 5 range. I think Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, and of course Trevor Lawrence will all go in the top 6. That le-
Whoa,
that is my
whoa,
I
that
wouldn't
is so.
I wouldn't even call that a bold prediction at this point.
I absolutely would. I
hundred
absolutely
percent,
would.
0% chance that is a bold prediction in my mind because I just think that's how high the quarterback demand is at this point. I think Mac Jones goes somewhere around 8-9 because I think there's just going to be so many trades in this top 10. I think there are going to be a lot of teams moving up and moving down, up and down the board to get their guy at quarterback. And I think Jones is going to be one of those guys that teams value at that pick to go get. But regardless, I have Darnold going to the Bears. I think that's something that really makes sense. Mitch, you think they hold on to him 1 year, which I actually have came out and supported. I think that wouldn't be the worst move in the world. Now moving on, let's talk about the third and final quarterback we have here, Deshaun Watson. This is probably the biggest name out of all of these guys list. Maybe Russell Wilson, but probably the biggest and most realistic trade quarterback that could be moved this off season. So I say that I do think he will be traded. You say no. Why do you say no? Then we'll come back to me.
The Texans are unwilling to trade him. As far as I am concerned, the McNair family has come out and said, we're not trading him. Will he end up sitting out a few games at the beginning of the year? I wouldn't be shocked. I publicly come out and said, like, if he sits out a few games, I'm not shocked and I wouldn't be opposed. If I'm Deshaun Watson, I'm demanding a trade. I'm refusing to play, especially because of the fact they didn't hire Eric Bieniemy, which, again, we've both come out and said is absolutely ridiculous. And so is most of the Chiefs staff, even though they're happy he's still there. But it's completely absurd that he hasn't been hired. The Texans are heading in a downward spiral, and they want to take Deshaun Watson with them. Yes, he has a huge cap hit, but they're so unwilling to make any move. And there are so many potential ways that Texans come out of this a bigger winner than whoever they trade them to. There's a chance. Actually, it's not such a big chance, but there still is a chance. So the question remains, how willing are the Texans to trade Deshaun Watson? I've seen no interest. They're not fielding calls for him. I don't think it's smart, and I disagree, but it's unlikely that he gets traded for the reason that the Texans are unwilling, and it's nothing to do with Deshaun Watson's request. They're going to ignore his request, and he's either going to sit or play.
Okay, Mitch. First off, I have to ask you a question because we need to clarify this. Are you saying that he won't get traded this offseason, or are you saying he won't get traded before the trade deadline of the 2021 NFL season?
I just think it's this offseason. I think he can easily be traded like later on in this year if he continues to sit out, which Deshaun, if you're listening, first of all, big fan. Second of all, sit out because they're going to have to trade you. That cap hit is huge. And the Texans, similar to a lot of other teams this offseason, are in a tight cap bind. So he will probably eventually be traded, but I don't think he'll get traded before week 1. I just don't see how why the Texans would do that without discussing more and more. Come draft day, if he does not get traded on draft day, he's not getting traded before week 1.
Okay, I actually definitely agree with that point because the Texans are absolutely going to want either Zach Wilson or Justin Fields because right now I think Zach Wilson and Justin Fields are both, even though we've talked, neither of us really love Justin Fields. I would even put Justin Fields pretty handedly above either Sam Howell or Spencer Rattler at this point in the 2021 draft. So if you're the Texans trying to draft a quarterback, I mean, Justin Fields and Zach Wilson are clearly the best two options in the next couple of years. So it makes sense that you're trying to get that top 3 pick right now. But I do think, I really think that either he will be traded before or on draft day. But what I think is more likely is that he's traded in the beginning stages of next season. Because what I really think we're going to see is Watson sitting out, and that's when it starts to get toxic. That's when the relationship really starts to get bad. When Watson and the Texans when the Texans are showing up and they're all participating, the coaches, the front office, they're all there for training camp and practice, and Deshaun Watson isn't. That's when it really starts to get bad. That's when it really starts to sour. because the relationship is getting bad as it is, and nobody is coming in contact with each other. No one is face to face. No one is having those face to face conversations at this moment. But as soon as that becomes a possibility, that's when it starts to go bad. You start to prep for the season and start to look ahead, that's when Deshaun Watson is really going to be traded. And that is when trade talks are really going to heat up. And I think a realistic possibility is the Carolina Panthers, because we've already seen. I actually think I'm not a big fan of putting all these little social media moves under a microscope, but I think this one might actually have carry some weight. We saw Teddy Bridgewater unfollow the Panthers Instagram account, which and he also changed his account to private. I actually think this is means kind of something, because Teddy Bridgewater has always been an excellent teammate. He's always been such a stand-up guy, really a role model, and just a great all-around person. To see him do something like this and take a step back and maybe feel offended in some sort of way. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but there was some sort of disconnect. Something went wrong there that led Teddy Bridgewater to do that. Whether that's the front office telling Teddy Bridgewater they're going to make a strong push at Deshaun Watson, which we already know is going to happen. I think something like that could have happened, and I think that actually carries some weight. Another thing is they've already said they're going to make strong pushes at Deshaun Watson. They're going to push all the chips into the table, and that really makes sense for me, because right now they're sitting at 8. Likely, you're looking at Mac Jones, maybe Trey Lance. I don't think Trey Lance would be on the board, but maybe Mac Jones at pick 8. If you're the Panthers, that's not ideal. You don't want a game manager as your franchise quarterback. You want Deshaun Watson as your franchise quarterback. So I think it's worth it to trade those 3 first-round picks, a good player, to get your franchise quarterback. And I think the Panthers, with this new Matt Rule regime, are going to be very aggressive in trying to get Watson. And I actually think they're going to pull the trigger and get it done. So, so moving on, let's talk about some money. Let's talk about the salary cap. 3 players that should be cut. 3 players each. This is not a collective list, but 3 players each that we think should be cut from their teams this offseason. Mitch, you can start it off. You have Golden Tate being cut by the New York Giants, which I actually very much agree with.
Golden Tate has been disappointing. With Detroit, disappointing, and with the Giants, I no one ever thought he was going to be wide receiver 1, but he was very subpar. And this is a Giants team that is average but promising. They have a chance. Their defense is underrated as anything. Their offense, I'm not going to say anything mean, but it's not great. So cutting Golden Tate saves you $6 million in cap space. Look, I'm not saying they're gonna cut him. Go out there, sign wide receiver 1, Allen Robinson this year. Even though we did discuss that, and if they cut him, saving $6 million could go a long way. But there are a ton of wide receivers that could land there and could easily replace a spot that he really just left empty and a sour taste in New York Giants fans' mouths because of his poor play and because of how easily replaceable he could be. Because Giants more than likely will go receiver in the draft, if not tight end, but that's another topic for Evan Ingram getting cut or traded. There's a chance, not saying it's going to happen, but there's a chance of that happening. So assuming wide receivers fall there, which now I'm more so forecasting that it's a possibility, more likely than not that one of the top wide receivers go there, drafting a good wide receiver could ultimately be beneficial if they cut Golden Tate, because that's a big cap casualty if they keep him on the roster.
Yeah, $6 million is a lot of bucks, that especially this season, because the salary cap is going down. Also, you can move Sterling Shepard inside the slot, which is where he thrives, which is his more natural position. And like we talked about, I had Allen Robinson going to the Giants, so I think that makes a lot of sense for New York. My number 1 guy is going to be Geno Atkins. Geno Atkins, the 32-year-old, I believe, defensive tackle for the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm actually a big fan of his because he's a very good player, always has been, and he's stuck around with the Bengals, right? He's always been on the Bengals for his entire career. And he just seems like a very good leader, good player on the field, good locker room guy, and also a great player. And he's been with the Bengals his entire career, which is why I think this is going to be a very hard decision, but a very necessary one. Because listen, by cutting him, you're saving $9.5 million. $9.5 million, almost 10. That's a lot of money, especially this season. That gives you a lot more money to go out and help Joe Burrow, get offensive line help, get weapons for him, get other younger defensive players who are going to have more of an impact, or you could put that money towards re-signing Carl Lawson or William Jackson the third, the cornerback. Those two guys are going to need to come back on defense. He just is a necessary cap casualty in my mind. He wasn't that productive this season, but given he only played one game, injured, so that could be a sign of his age. Really, I just don't see any way where it's smart to keep him on the roster. You also have DJ Reader there, so he's not really a necessity. It's just there's no argument for keeping him, and there is so many reasons to get rid of him, as tough as it will be for the Cincinnati Bengals.
I think the Bengals are starting to turn on the Jets and realizing they have to let go of franchise stars. Last year, they had to say a tough goodbye to franchise legend Andy Dalton. This year, Geno Atkins and AJ Green, more likely than not, another franchise legend that they're going to have to say goodbye to. And they're realizing that, okay, we need to help the future because the Bengals have a very bright future, and keeping Geno Atkins on the team is ultimately preventing them from becoming one of the better teams in the National Football League. Now, the second guy that I have is Jimmy Graham. I didn't like when the Bears, I think they signed him or traded him. I didn't like it. I did not see the reason why. I think Jimmy Graham's a great, like a fine player. Nothing really jumps out at me when you say Jimmy Graham, unless you're talking about when he played on the Saints, and that was 7, 8 years ago. This is a guy that is aging, and I think similar to Geno Atkins, there's no place for him. Cole Kmet, emerging tight end that I liked a lot, and I'm sure more people will come to know his name next year. But I think that having Cole Kmet on the roster, the Bears are in a bind right now because I don't know if they're in win now mode or if they're in rebuilding mode. I think they're kind of just in the what in the
Seems
world
like
do
they
I do?
seems like they kind of can't decide which one they want to be in.
They're like a pool and hot tub, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
eliminating Jimmy Graham just doesn't matter if you're in win now or rebuild. Cutting Jimmy Graham just benefits you.
Yeah, I mean, they started 5-0 and then they finished 3-8. If that's not the most like bipolar season you've ever seen, I mean, I don't know what is.
No,
Also,
we're winning too much. We're winning too much. Stop
yeah,
it.
stop,
Stop it.
stop, stop, stop. Um, but yeah, signing Jimmy Graham just didn't make sense to me from the beginning because at the time you already had 7 tight ends on the roster before you signed Jimmy Graham and before you drafted Cole Kmet. So, I mean, before it was all said and done, before you made cuts, you had 9 tight ends on the roster, which is a little ridiculous. That's a little bit out of hand. Also, it made even less sense when they drafted Cole Kmet because if you're going to bring in a young tight end, why do you want to bring in a guy that's going to eat up those snaps like Jimmy Graham? The next guy that I have on my list is going to be Quan Alexander, the linebacker from the New Orleans Saints. This is a guy that they traded for midseason around the trade deadline to help them push all their chips into the table and help them win another Super Bowl. But the biggest reason why Quan Alexander is one of my bigger cap casualties that absolutely needs to be cut is because his cap hit. Take a seat, folks. His cap hit. If you cut him, you will be saving $13.1 million. 13.1. That is a lot of money that you are saving if you're the New Orleans Saints. And this is a team that has the least amount of money to spend in the NFL. I don't exactly have the exact number, but I know for a fact that the New Orleans Saints are the team most over the salary cap going into this offseason. So they have a lot of work to do. Cutting Quan Alexander takes a big step towards getting back under that salary cap That shaves off $13 million right there. That helps you really get back to just zero. Just getting back to zero is all you need if you're the Saints. It's gonna kind of hurt your chances next year, but cutting Quan Alexander is a huge step in the right direction to getting back to just legal in the NFL.
I tell you what, as much as I want the Saints to go back to zero, cutting Quallen Alexander will only do so much. They're ready for this. Take a seat. They're negative $65 million in cap, like negative cap space. Sure, it's a step in the right direction, and it's something that's absolutely necessary. I'm not bashing on your pick because it's
It has to
absolutely
happen.
right, but they're not getting next to zero anytime soon. And I know this is the topic for this week, but like Drew Brees, is he retiring? Is he not? I don't even know anymore. I'm so confused with the quarterback
yeah,
picture
I
now. I don't know what to think.
Yeah, I heard it this week. I'm not sure if you saw it. I think I saw it on Instagram. We probably follow the same accounts, but I saw that potentially he could be returning for 2021 and might not hang it up, which I just think that's a mistake. And I'm not saying this because you're gonna hurt your legacy or something.
That
I
is why
I
I would
mean,
say he should not do it.
it's
His
it's
legacy's already like falling down the cliff. You want to go straight down like Brett Favre did? Have a nice time.
I don't think it's really going to hurt his legacy because we already, all right, dude, we already saw Peyton Manning's last season. If that can't burn someone's legacy to the ground, I don't think what Drew Brees will do is going to hurt him so much. But listen, I'm not one to say, oh, it's just going to hurt his legacy, and then he comes back to win a Super Bowl like Tom Brady. It's nothing like that. It's just I just don't think it's smart. I mean, you have nothing left to prove. There's no reason to come back. You're over 40. Go spend time with your kids. Let the Saints
Win
re-
the MVP. Watch him. No,
let
I'm joking. No, he will not do that.
let the Saints
Absolutely not.
restructure. Let the Saints restructure contracts so they aren't absolutely screwed for the 2021 season. So, Mitch, who is your third player that must be cut?
My third guy that must be cut, and I like this guy a lot, and I just think he's not worth the contract. His name hasn't jumped out at me since 2014. Malcolm Butler. This Titans defense is an area that needs a lot of improvement. Just not a lot of stellar things happening over in Nashville over the past year defensively because they are a very good offense. Very good. I wouldn't say elite, but I'd say like top 15 offense for sure. Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, AJ Brown, not Corey Davis anymore, Jonnu Smith. But their defense just is not good. And Malcolm Butler taking up $10 million. He may have had the $10 million play in Super Bowl 49, which I love referencing so much, but he's not worth $10 million at all. And the Titans are a team that are contending for a Super Bowl. I don't know that they're the top contender, but they are definitely contending. And the thing that's holding them back is their defense. And by releasing Malcolm Butler, spending most of your draft on defense is ultimately the best thing for them because their cap space right now is I actually can't find it right now. It's 2 million. So you drop 10 million, that's 12 million. You can sign some decent player that's better than Malcolm Butler for $12 billion. And again, better than Malcolm Butler, that's a very low bar in my opinion, but Malcolm Butler $10 million not worth it.
Yeah, I think what we saw with Malcolm Butler in that Tennessee Titans contract was something like, all right, he got the huge play in Super Bowl 49. He was an up and coming player at that point. He wasn't great, didn't show huge flashes, but he was an up and coming player. He was a solid player. We see that so often with Patriots cornerbacks, players like that. But then he made that play. It was a standout play that really caught everyone's attention. And that's why he got signed to that deal because it just stuck out. It just stuck out to people. And I really think that is a big factor in why he got this big of a contract and now this big of a cap hit for not a great player. Like you said, it has to be done. And I also think it's something that very well could happen. We saw the Titans draft Christian Fulton, the cornerback from LSU, in the second round in the 2020 NFL draft. So they could be gearing up to release Malcolm Butler and usher in Fulton as their cornerback two next to Adoree
I don't
Jackson.
know if we should start talking about Titans draft picks. I feel like today's a bad day to talk about that.
Dude, if you're talking about Isaiah
Well,
Wilson,
I think there's only one story that it possibly could be.
I think
Just what
I
is
think
that? Like, what are you doing?
I
You're throwing away your whole career. He is. I'm sorry. No team's gonna sign him after he threw away his career this offseason and he was a first round pick. And now he's like, oh, I'm not playing for the Titans anymore. Tried to delete your tweet. That's not how social media works, buddy. We can track what you did. And the fact he even said that, I can't believe it. Titans screwed up big time.
also big point. He did that much stuff and messed up with the DUIs and stuff. And then he says he's done playing with the Titans. Well, where else do you think you're gonna go? like I mean,
Like you're done, you're
I don't
done.
see
So
any other time and any other team really bringing you in. But that's a not the discussion for today. But just had to get that out there. Interesting situation. If you want to go read up on it, there's practically a story everywhere
just go into
about the
ESPN, you'll find it in 2 seconds for sure.
yeah, on the Isaiah Wilson situation, offensive tackle out of Georgia, already looks like he was a big mistake for the Tennessee Titans. So my third guy is going to be Desmond Trufant for the Detroit Lions. If you cut him, it's a $6.1 million increase to your salary cap. And the Detroit Lions are over the salary cap by $1 million. So cutting him will get you back over to $5 million, which is of course something that has to be done. You have to get back over or under the salary cap. Back under the salary cap, and cutting Desmond Trufant perfectly gets you there. And it also gets you there without losing too much production, but it also gets you there without losing a guy that you're really going to miss. You have Amani Aruarie behind him in cornerback. He's a younger guy from Penn State, showed some flashes last year. Interested to see what he can do in a bigger role. You also have Jeff Okudah, who was not good last year. He was not good in his rookie season, but there aren't many rookie cornerbacks that are great, but he stuck out like a sore thumb as not a great player, but got to cut him some slack because he is a younger cornerback, and those guys often tend to struggle. So it's going to be very interesting to see, again, what he does in his sophomore year. That's normally the year when cornerbacks break out and really show some stuff, show that potential, show that elite talent. So I think those two guys really should get starting roles because this is a team that's rebuilding. This is a team that needs to revitalize their offense and their defense. They are in no way, shape, or form trying to win at this point. And Desmond Trufant is 30. He's not a guy that you're going to develop. So get Aruarie and Okudah more snaps, more playing time. You do that by cutting Desmond Trufant. So those are our three guys that should be cut this offseason. Now let's talk about kind of the inverse. Three guys that really boosted their market value and their overall value in free agency this season. So this is going to be, of course, pending free agents that we think got better throughout the course of the 2020 season. So Mitch, I see one guy that pops out at the top of your list, and I'm very confused about it. So I'd like you to explain. The Ndamukong Suh is at the top of your list for guys, the 34-year-old defensive tackle. So, I mean, care to explain?
I, I have a good explanation for you. If I'm going to be honest with you, heading into the season, the Ndamukong Suh, besides me and my friend, we like watching him. He's a fun player, especially looking back to his older highlights. As you mentioned, he's 34 years old. I'm not saying he's going to get a massive extension, but I think that he had a good enough season that he proves he can play one more year at a decently high level. This is a guy that heading into like this offseason, I don't think a lot of guys would consider signing beyond maybe being a locker room leader. Now I think this is a guy that I'm not saying he's going to contend for a Pro Bowl, All Pro, sack leader. Whoa, 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 relax. I'm not what I'm saying here, but what I'm saying is this is a guy that had a better season than I personally thought. So that's why he deserves a chance at another 1, 2 years tops, 1, 2 years tops, instead of being completely done because I thought he would be. And he impressed me a little bit. He was not the sack monster, but he was a playmaker. You looked at him in the playoffs, got a lot of pressures, and he's still a guy that can compete. And that's all you want from defensive linemen. They don't have to get sacks, but if they get pressures and they compete and they stop the run, that's what counts. And Ndamukong Suh did that at a better level than I thought. So he's deserving of a decent little deal that may or may not keep him in Tampa because Tampa, they've got a few players to re-sign this offseason. So I don't know that he's going to be in Tampa, But if he wants to go play somewhere else, I think he's a well-deserved signing.
Yeah, those Tampa Bay Stars are going to get paid for sure. Talking about Levante David, Shaquille Barrett, Chris Godwin. I mean, there are guys for days on that team that need to be paid, and stars as well, instrumental to the Buccaneers' success. Now, Sue, listen, I understand where you're coming from, but first off, what do you think his annual average will be? What do you think he will be paid?
$5 million tops.
Okay, I can.
Again, I did not say he was getting a massive deal. I'm just saying he did better than I expected, and he gets another shot, another chop at the tree. He doesn't. If you're gonna sign him to a 3-year, like expensive deal that pays him more than $5 million, you just got ripped off for a player. Unless it's like 6 million, but like that's stretching it in my opinion. You pay him a low deal for a quality player that you should expect to slow down, but that's what I expected from him this year. So he's gonna decline at some point. It just wasn't this year.
Okay, I can get behind that. I think, he probably isn't. I mean,
Not the greatest player. No, no, no.
yeah.
This is not going to be the star pupil of your defense here, but it's going to be a guy that may be a team leader and deserves another chop at the tree. And maybe more. No, sorry. It's going to be more than a team leader, but not a star. Just like a player that's on your team and plays fine and you're not complaining about him because his cap hit's not through the roof, but he's not sabotaging the team, a
Yeah.
liability like
Ok
some other players are that age. I'm not calling out Drew Brees here. Okay, maybe I'm calling out Drew Brees here.
Calling out Drew Brees there.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah,
Enough
probably not the best idea.
enough NFL team fans hate me. I feel I get a lot of hate, but you know
You ma
what?
you kinda make a lot of enemies throughout your conversations.
I've made a ton. A lot of people just hate me because I bring the fire, I bring the fun takes. They're like, no, this is unrealistic. You're crazy. But
You
you know
bring
what?
some hot takes.
That's you know what? Some people bring the hot takes and they're not always right, but it's always fun to listen to because maybe they're right and sometimes they're wrong.
Yeah. So I can realistically get behind the Dominican Sue getting like $5 million here. Listen, I think it's probably an increase what he was gonna get previously, but listen, you're right. He did play better than we expected. So now my first guy is gonna be Hassan Reddick. I mean, this is a no-brainer in my mind. He was top 5 in sacks. He was second in tackles for loss this season, only second to my defensive player of the year. My defensive player of the year, TJ Watt. Okay. Second,
Yours? He's
yeah, he
yours?
is my defense. I do not accept Aaron Donald as the defensive player of the year this season. TJ Watt got absolutely robbed. Absolutely robbed.
Rams
Absolutely
fans,
robbed.
attack him. Attack him. Attack him.
As good as Aaron Donald was, we got way too caught up in the hype around Donald and the name. I mean, TJ Watt was, I don't want to say vastly better, but it should have been an obvious choice that TJ Watt was
Double
defensive
teams,
player of the year.
triple teams. Look, sure, you bring the double teams and triple teams on Aaron Donald. What, you think they're just leaving TJ Watt one on one? Like,
Exactly.
come on.
especially especially after Bud Dupree went down with injury.
Like sure. Aaron Donald, like it's more visible because look, Aaron Donald, because they have to actually make a case for Aaron Donald. TJ Watt, there's like already a case. You don't need to build up double teams because that's basically already taken into account. Look, I don't know how many double teams, triple teams TJ Watt's been on, but don't act as if he's left one on one with some rookie undrafted left tackle every single game. Like, come on now. And I'm not discrediting Aaron Donald, but TJ Watt also kind of deserved it. But it could have went either way. I had TJ Watt winning it. Just
Yeah.
saying.
So getting back to Son Reddick, he had, let's see, he had 13.5 sacks this season. That was tied for second in the NFL with Trey Hendrickson, who we're also going to talk about in a second. Hassan Reddick he had over 20, I believe 20 tackles for loss, which was, again, second in the NFL. So when you have a production like that on not so great defense, on a defense where there aren't a ton of other guys contributing, um, that's impressive. That's impressive when you can have a breakout year like that. And also, I don't think this was just a 1 year wonder kind of thing because previously in his earlier seasons, he wasn't playing edge rusher. He was kind of more of an off ball linebacker, kind of a hybrid type of player, not the position he played at Temple. He was, and again, an edge rusher. Seeing him get back to his college form and his college position obviously did wonders for him. This is where he is meant to be. This is the position he was meant to play, edge rusher. And when he finally played it in the NFL, he had clear and obvious success, crazy success, off the charts. So now he deserves to be paid. And you look at him, you look at what he did this season, and there is no way that you can deny that. He was incredible this year.
I absolutely agree with that. I thought Hassan Reddick was phenomenal. He had that one game which killed me in fantasy. The person I played did not have like the Cardinals defense. I'm in an IDP league. Hassan Reddick, I lost in the semifinals, and I know the person that I'm playing listens to your podcast. You know who you are. I am mad. I'm still mad about that. I'm gonna get revenge on you next year. But anyways, Son Reddick, phenomenal player, absolutely deserving of a contract. Another guy that I think is deserving of a contract. A lot of people may think I'm a little crazy, but I don't think I am. I might be a little bit oddballish in saying Nelson Aguilar deserves a deal. I think Nelson Aguilar had a very good year. If he resigns with Vegas, that's an absolute win for John Gruden and his offense. This year, Nelson Aguilar had 8 touchdown catches, which is honestly 6 more than I thought he would catch. He averaged, I believe, it was how many yards per catch? It is 18.7 yards per catch, second in the league. Big play guy. How many yards per game, though? We won't talk about yards per game because no one asked. But, again, this is a guy that I think is deserving of a good deal. This is a guy that shocked me, had a good year, had almost 900 receiving yards, just 4 shy of 900. So I think he's deserving of a contract. I think he played phenomenal this year, and I think he can be phenomenal over the next 2, 3 years. He's 29, and I think that's good enough for a good deal. And these stats show 48 receptions, almost 900 yards, 19 yards per reception, basically, 8 touchdowns. I think that's deserving of a quality deal in the NFL. Not top 10 paid per se, but, you know, enough to get paid like a decent receiver, wide receiver two, like a quality wide receiver two numbers, not wide receiver one numbers, but a guy that is a good player and Derek Carr seems to like. And Henry Ruggs, Nelson Aguilar, and probably another wide receiver drafted this year. If not, they'll go defense. But wide receiver 3, there's a chance that Vegas turns scary, especially in the division that will be tough to win considering Chargers and Chiefs and not Broncos.
I
I had to
actually
specify the no Broncos.
I actually like that pick because that was something I was considering putting on here. But I actually like that pick because I think people just get so caught up in, he had some drop issues in Philadelphia.
Philly.
Yeah, in Philadelphia. He just wasn't the best wide receiver there. And then he goes to Las Vegas and he is really good. He plays really good wide receiver too, football, and no one is paying any attention to it. No one's paying any attention to it. And it makes sense because you look at ESPN, you look at NFL, all they want is the stuff that's going to get the most engagements, right? The stuff that's going to get the most views and the most watches. You really think 10 videos of or 8 videos of Nelson Aguilar catching touchdown passes is going to get the most views and the most watches and the most crowd engagements. People don't want to see that. People want to see the guy who had drop issues in Philadelphia. That's why I really don't think he's getting a lot of hype this free agency period. But he is a good wide receiver too at this point. He cured the drop issues. Like you said, he got in the end zone a lot this season, 8 times. So I really think that's a realistic thing that he could be paid some solid money. Just the hype isn't there because the media sources are choosing not to cover him. So another guy that I selected, a wide receiver as well, kind of a guy that broke out this year, Curtis Samuel from the Carolina Panthers. I really like this player because he's so versatile. You can put him in the slot, mainly a slot wide receiver. Doesn't really play outside often, but if you really wanted to, you could put him out there. Primarily a slot guy, though. You could also line him up in the backfield. He played a little bit of running back in college, so he has that versatility as well. This season, he was used very. That versatility was really used to the Panthers' advantage throughout the course of the season with a offensive mastermind in Joe Brady. He really gets the most out of his players. Curtis Samuel had 851 receiving yards this year, which is a career high by over 200. He also had 200 rushing yards this year, which is, again, a career high. So I think you look at him, you say, this is a very versatile player who is very explosive, very fast, and we can use him in multiple ways. That is, I mean, you talk about a modern day NFL player. He's not the best player, but you talk about a modern day NFL player. Curtis Samuel fits the bill exactly. I think a lot of teams are really going to value that. Now, the third and final player that both me and you, Mitch, have on our list is going to be Trey Hendrickson. This is a guy that I really think is fitting to wrap up the show with to talk about because the season he had, not only did it come out of nowhere, it was truly stunning.
Absolutely. He had a phenomenal year, a year that, as you mentioned, no one was really expecting. I wasn't expecting it. And if you bet a bunch of money that he would have as many sacks as he did, probably would have laughed at you. He had 13 and a half sacks, only trailing TJ Watt and Aaron Donald. And sacks is something that's very highly valued in the NFL, as it should be. But, he had 12 and a half, he had a ton of sacks. And I think he just had an overall really great year, a solid football player coming out of nowhere, which we saw a lot of that this year. A lot of players that I've never even heard of just all of a sudden burst out of nowhere. Trey Hendricks seems to be one of them, and he was hiding in New Orleans. Look, he's not getting re-signed to New Orleans. We already discussed this, that they are in no position to sign anybody this offseason. I'm sorry, Saints fans. It's going to be a rough couple of years. But Trey Hendrickson is a guy that I can see getting one of the bigger deals this offseason, and it's well deserved.
For sure. I mean, you look at him, 13 and a half sacks this season. Not only did he have 13 and a half sacks, you compare that to the other people that are around him. Aaron Donald had 13 and a half sacks as well. As much as I may not like it, he did win Defensive Player of the Year. TJ Watt also 1.5 sacks ahead of Trey Hendrickson. 1.5 sacks ahead of Trey Hendrickson. So that isn't a lot. I mean, that's basically right there. Trey Hendrickson, you're putting him up here with guys that are the best at their positions, defensive tackle, outside linebacker / edge rusher. His stats are comparable. His stats are comparable. They are right there. So Trey Hendrickson, probably not going to be one of those $20 million a year guys, but he's going to get a healthy amount. He's going to be mid-teens. He's going to be making mid-teens money. Absolutely, like he deserves. So that is going to wrap it up for episode 35 of the First and Goal podcast. Thank you, Mitch, for coming on as always.
Of course. Thanks for having me. But before we do end it off, I do have a great trivia question for you, and I'm sure you know the answer because it's been all over my Instagram and probably yours too today. Since the merger, there's only one NFL quarterback that has played 50 plus games and has never thrown a pick six. I'm sure you've seen this stat, but if you have not, take a guess. Who could this person be? Only one player.
Has never thrown a pick six.
Never.
50 games?
50 plus games, yes. It is not Aaron Rodgers. It is not Peyton Manning. It is not Tom
Definitely
Brady.
not
It is not Joe Montana. Who is it?
Ooh, I haven't seen this one.
It's been all over my Instagram, so I'm kind of shocked.
Is it a younger player?
Sure. I'd say he's youngish. Yes, he's a current player.
He's a current player. Is that, do you mean like below 30? Is he younger than 30?
Yes.
Okay.
He's younger than 30.
Let's just go Patrick Mahomes.
No, it is not Patrick Mahomes. It is the one and only MVP.
Oh,
Mitch Trubisky.
Oh, dude. Okay. Life lesson. Hold on. Big life lesson coming up. If you ever see a Bears fan, never tell them that they missed on Watson and Mahomes. Because listen, you're seeing the proof right now. Mitch Trubisky has
Never,
never thrown a pick
never
six, and he is the only MVP in NFL history. So that,
is
guys,
rewarding.
that's, I mean,
Sign
golf.
him to the Mahomes contract. Sign him.
Bring him in, sign him $50 million a year just because of that stat. So, on that high note, that's going to wrap up episode 35 of the First and Goal podcast, this Tuesday edition with Mitch Weinberg. Please leave a rating, share it with a friend, helps out the podcast a lot. The podcast is, of course, available wherever you get your podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google, wherever it is. Go swing by the website as well, firstandgoalfootballtalk.com, where I write articles about everything going on in the NFL and NCAA worlds. There's also going to be a lot more draft content going up there, like scouting reports, mock drafts, big boards, all that good stuff. So if you're into that stuff, go check that out. The website is the place for that. Also, go swing by the YouTube First and Goal on YouTube. I'm going to be posting videos more frequently there for sure as we get into the off season, as there is more time. So go check that out if you're into quicker opinion and analysis videos. And finally, if you want to stay into the loop on everything going on here at First and Goal that me and Mitch are doing with the podcast, with the website, even with the YouTube, that the Twitter is the place for that. First and Goal FB, the Twitter handle that you can go follow on Twitter. So until next time, until Thursday by myself, and then next Tuesday with Mitch again, Sam Levine and Mitch Weinberg signing off.